welcome back to the channel. If you are a subscriber, if you are new here, also welcome. I hope that you will find the content on this channel with regards to RC tabletop reviews, how-tos, etc. helpful and useful. I'm making this video because there appears to be a real shortage of content on YouTube with regards to two-wheel drive short course trucks associated. In particular, there's a couple out there made from the perspective of bashing, not so much racing. Two-wheel drive short course remains one of my absolute favorite 10 scale classes, if not my favorite 10 scale class. I particularly like it. Well, I like it on carpet and I like it on dirt. On dirt, I race a rear motor Pro SC10 that I've modified significantly. There are videos on this channel, quite popular, about the modifications that I've made. Essentially, I've upgraded the Pro SC10 RTR truck with race quality electronics and SC6.1 parts. So that's increased the durability and the tunability of that vehicle. I'm pretty successful at the local club level here with that setup. Carpet racing, I go for the I had a T6.1, then a T6.2, and now I'm upgrading to the T6.4. So, sorry, SC6.4. First thing I want to do in this build video is show you the modifications, the hop-up parts that I purchased before even building it. And I've done this based on prior experience racing this platform on carpet. These parts have proven for me to increase the handling and durability. So the goal here is to do a build video. That's boring. Just watching someone build on fast forward is kind of lame. But what I will do is I'm going to start by showing you the hop-up parts. I'll make the video, and basically I'll just chime in when it comes time to modifying something from the instructions. So when I deviate from the instructions, I'll get into the detail of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So let's start with the parts. There are more parts on the way, but I've got enough here to get started. Some of the parts, actually, this is one part that's left over from the previous build. Team Associated, the ball cups that are used for the sway bars are also used for the steering linkage that goes between the servo horn and the rack, and they stretch and are pretty sloppy. These are actually Schumacher, and there's a set screw in there to hold the two together. The length is perfect. On the Team Associated one, you put one of the ball stud washers in between the two plastic ball cups. So these are actually Schumacher, and if I remember, I'll include a link to them on AMA below in the video description. These tighten things up and remove some slop. So that's one of the first changes that I make. Next, speaking of steering, aluminum servo horn, and there's two types. This one doesn't clamp on the bottom. I like this one. This one is a clamping one. It has a bolt that goes through the bottom to clamp it onto the outdrive, and of course the same screw in the center. You'll notice this one's been filed at an angle. There must have been a clearance issue in some car I had that horn on. So this one was the only one in stock. Doesn't have the clamp. Doesn't matter. Doesn't need it. Next, these are the RC10 B6.4 factory team aluminum steering bell cranks. Towards the end of the B3 series, they had +3 something. They changed the angle on them, but then they changed the geometry of the 0.4 steering altogether. So these are back to being straight, not offset. So on carpet, I run aluminum bell cranks and an aluminum rack. On plastic, I just run the aluminum bell cranks in a plastic rack. Of course, a gear diff. I already built one and made a video on how I rebuild them. This one's going to stay in the package until the replacement aluminum gear cover comes in. I already have the aluminum cross pins, so these will just get set aside and built at a later date. Springs. So the carpet track that I run on requires some pretty stiff springs so that the vehicle doesn't roll too much in the corners and roll over. So I'm going with blue on the front and gray in the rear. So as I build the shocks, I'll just immediately put those on there. Next, they're not making them out of brass anymore. I don't know if brass is expensive or what the deal is, but this is a B6.3 factory team steel bulkhead, 25 degree or 30 degree. The 0.4 kit comes with two plastic ones that have multiple degrees. I believe one is 0 and the other one is maybe 25 and 30. And of course, this is the angle of your kingpin inclination. You can also change that the total number depends on what insert you use in your steering blocks here. And finally, the chassis weight. There's a ESC plate and the one that goes under the servo that has not changed, so I'll be using that from our previous kit or setup. And this is the one that you can get this in brass too, not made by Associated, made by another company. I've only run the steel on carpet, that was enough. These help keep the center of gravity low. Short course trucks are notorious for having a high center of gravity, which causes issues in corners, and you have to burn off some corner speed to avoid rolling over. So this helps keep your CG low. So we'll get into the build, and again, I'll follow the manual, and as I deviate from the manual, I'll chime in and tell you what I'm up to. Okay, bag one, step one is the steering assembly, the rack and the bell cranks. First thing that I do is locate the hardware for that step. And I'm going to put it all inside my magnetic parts holder here. There. I noticed some differences right away from the previous kits, some caster hat bushings and whatnot. So already we're going to deviate from the instructions because we're not going to use any of the plastic parts that came in the kit. They'll be tossed in the box as spares. So also in bag one is your ball stud mount, redesigned for the 0.4 series. So I'm going to crack into our factory team parts right away. And I noticed that there's actually some instructions. So rarely do hop-up parts come with instructions. You're just supposed to know, I guess. Okay, so it's recommending Loctite on the ball studs that go into the rack, so that's fine. Your bearings go into the rack with a ball stud washer, 1mm ball stud washer in between the two. And that is it for Loctite. There's nothing. Okay, they're showing that the ball stud on the crank goes into the front hole, and the bolt that holds it to the rack goes in the back hole. So kind of simple, self-explanatory. All right, so step one according to the manual: locate your rack and place it in the correct orientation. I'm going to remove my bearings from, so this means I'm going to have extra bearings left over, which is always a good thing. I'm going to remove the bearings from the factory team part. There's two ball stud washers that came with the rack, and those are the ones that will go in between the bearings. So I'm going to just press the bottom ones in first. Then I'll drop my ball stud washers down on top. The one on the my right locked into place quite well and is staying put. The one on the left, nope. So that's going to be a pain. That's going to fall out all the time until I get things attached. Oh, there you go. Hot mess all over the place. So those don't want to stay in there. We're not going to waste time trying to keep them in. We'll put them in at a later point when we put the bolts in place. Fail number one. All right. So kit setup calls for the 8mm ball stud. That's we have what looks to be 2 8s and 2 10s maybe. Those are a couple of 8s. What I love about the associated kits, so you can just take them and put threaded end against threaded end to see which is longer. So obviously the one on the bottom must be a 10, the one on the top must be an 8. So that's one way to identify. Another way of identifying, you can just take your ball stud on your driver, and the associated manuals come with scale drawings of the hardware. So if you're really stuck, not sure, you just bring it over and you lay it onto the manual like so, and that tells me that's the 8mm. Now, so it's calling for 2 8mm ball studs into the rack with 1mm ball stud washers. Now I will reference my setup sheet from, so this setup sheet was from April 2nd, 2022, qualified first in the A main, TQ finished in first place. I had 1mm on there at that time. However, it's a different steering system, totally different rack, different geometry, different feel. Can't necessarily go off of that setup sheet from the 0.1 and 0.2. So in this case, because this is new, I will build it as per the kit with regards to the geometry of the ball stud spacing for the steering, test it, and then decide if I want to remove it or not. And removing this ball stud washer from the ball stud on the rack takes your rod, your tie rod, your ball link, turnbuckle, can't think of any other names for the part, and moves it away from the wheel, calming down the steering, making it less sensitive. Checking the manual, see if it calls for any Loctite. It does not. That's one. Okay. Ball studs are installed. Next is the rack. First thing you're going to want to do on the rack is install the 5mm ball stud that your steering linkage, this one, will hook onto. So that is the smallest of the ball studs that are in there. One of these cranks has 2 holes, the other one has 1. Again, the ball stud goes in the forward hole. Okay. Next, we have steering hat bushings. There's 2 sizes. The smaller ones will go up through the rack for the bolts, an M3x12 that hold the rack or the bell cranks to the rack. So now it's time to reinstall those bearings and those caster and the ball stud washers. Try and hold this all together so that the bearings don't fall out. And next will be the steering hat bushing and the M3 by 12 millimeter bolt. I'm going to hold it like that so that things stay into place. I'm going to put the M3 by 12 millimeter screw inside the steering bushing. There's one ready to roll. Now, it's an easier way to do this. Put the bolt on the magnetic tray and then drop the bushing down on top of the bolt. Or so I thought. Don't get fancy for a lot. There we go. That's done. Oh, okay. So, looking at the instructions for the factory parts, factory team parts versus the manual, apparently these bushings are not required when using the factory team parts because they will not fit inside those bearings. So we're going to remove those. Later on, I'll be test fitting those factory or the kit parts to see what's going on with that. All right. So we got the rack built. Well, built. The rack has the bearings and the bushings installed, and now it's time to put the bell cranks on. Paying attention to which side has the. So I place the part in the same orientation as the manual, so that I can make sure I get the crank with the bell or with the ball stud located on the correct side. Oh yeah, the manual didn't call for any Loctite on the ball stud into the rack because it's going into plastic. However, the instructions for the factory team parts do call for Loctite on that ball stud into that rack. I'm glad I went back and double checked that. So I will get on that here momentarily once I get the bell cranks installed in the correct orientation. Okay, so there we have the factory team aluminum steering. You don't need to watch me remove those ball studs and put Loctite on there. So I will pause the video and come back when there's something noteworthy. In this particular step, the deviation from the kit was these steering hat bushings don't get used when you use the aluminum factory team rack and bell cranks. All right, we're on to bag 2, step 1. And as Forrest Gump once said, I'm not a smart man, Jenny. So I can read, but this sounds confusing to me. There are 2 bulkheads included in the kit, 0 degree and 2.5 degree. 0 is the standard used. 0 is the standard used. Then you come over here to the diagram and it says bulkhead, use plus 2.5. So here it says to use plus 2.5. Here it says 0 is the standard used. Used when? Used for what? The arrows on the 2.5 degree bulkhead should point forward for the desired setting. Okay, the desired setting. So again, you're trying to get a total kick-up. And the total kick-up includes the degrees of the bulkhead and the degrees of the bushing put into the steering block. Do I have this cut open yet? No, well, let's cut it open. Okay. Here are the inserts I'm talking about. Here's the steering blocks I'm talking about. We have 0, 2.5, and 5. So, if I want a total of 3 degrees of kick up, then, hold on now, not 3. Mine had the 5. So, you add up the degrees listed on these inserts. So, if I go with the 2.5, 2.5 degrees on these inserts and 2.5 degrees on the bulkhead, it's going to give me a total of 5 degrees angle of these parts this way. Kingpin. Change the angle of the kingpin, you change the kingpin inclination, and that changes the steering response. So here you see the one on this side, my left, is 0 degrees. And this one is plus 2.5 or negative 2.5, depending on which direction you put that on the chassis. Because I'm running this on carpet and I want a forward weight bias, I'm using a heavier steel one up front. And I used to use brass, but they don't make a brass for the 0.4 anymore. So I'm going to go with this diagram. It says use plus 2.5. And then we'll see what it says later on when we start building these parts. Confused? I am. Alrighty. We're back to deviating from the manual. So we're at the point now, well, here's what we got so far. The ball stud mount and bulkhead are installed. That steering rack, there is no play, no slop. It is phenomenal. Side rails are attached, chassis weight is attached, and the B6 battery foams are attached. It shows some B6.4 foams as well, smaller ones. I believe they go in here. I have not attached those yet. We're on to the deviation, and that is the front anti-roll bar. The kit comes with the hardware and the roll bar itself, 1.3 millimeter. Well, that's no bueno, not for what we're doing. We're on carpet, and this is kind of a unique situation. This is a B64. So the long since discontinued 4-wheel drive 10 scale buggy by Team Associated. B64 front sway bar. The orange one, which I believe is 1.8 millimeters. That's what I ran on my SC6.1 and 2. And gosh darn it, that's what I'm going to run on this truck. So it's already set up with the hardware. I'll install that moving forward. All right, it's time to point out a couple of things here. One, hopefully the camera will pick up the difference in color here. The links that attach the anti-roll bar to the suspension arm, look at that color of black. Look at this color of gray. So this is a new type of plastic in the associated kits that has come out since the days of the 0.1 and the 0.2. So I'm assuming that this plastic addresses the concern I had about the steering link. It probably is less prone to stretching as this older black plastic is. And if we look at the Schumacher plastic ball cups that I use for my steering links, identical color, so probably the same type of polymer. That's one thing. The other is the groove in the ball stud mount for the sway bar, anti-roll bar. Eesh. It looks to me like that is not dropping down inside as it should. So to confirm that, I'm going to take out the 1.3 that came in the kit and see if it drops down inside the ball stud mount. And yes, it certainly does drop down inside that groove. Easier than the 1.8 millimeter does. So that may become a problem. Although I know there's an associated driver who has a video about his, I think it's a clay setup. I can't remember if he mentioned using it or not. I read somewhere online in a forum or maybe on Facebook that they're still using the B64 1.8 millimeter bar up front. So I may have to get in there and open that slot up. I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see when I put the top plate on. Next, the kit instructions do not call for the installation of a servo plate, but I do. So there's another deviation from the manual. Based on my previous experience with carpet short course setups, I do run this servo weight underneath the servo. So before I install the servo, I will put that steel plate on under there, and then it's servo mount is all assembled, ready to be dropped in. That'll go in after the plate is secured, and then it'll be the side Nerf bars and top plate and shock tower. If anything exciting and interesting happens, I will tune back in. All right, so I'm at the point now where it's time to attach the ball stud, or the top plate rather, and shock tower, all that stuff, to the ball stud mount below. And as I suspected, the groove in the ball stud mount, this groove right through here, will need to be opened up. It is too narrow to accommodate that 1.8 millimeter anti-sway bar. How do I know this? Before even attaching the top plate with any screws, we have some binding. That should fall freely, and it is not falling freely. If I put any pressure on that whatsoever, the shock towers stay up. You need everything to move freely, otherwise you will have inconsistent handling. So I need to open up this channel for this sway bar in order to allow the sway bar to fall in and move freely. Otherwise, I will have binding and the suspension won't move correctly, and we will have inconsistent handling. So I'm going to try and just get in there with a drill bit, maybe a 2 millimeter drill bit, a little hand drill, come in from the side like so, and open that up. And after I get that done, we'll come back and see if I was successful or scrap the part. All right, success. I got in there with this little hand drill and bit and reamed out that gap, that channel for the 1.8 millimeter sway bar, and we're just about there. Just a few more passes, because once I actually screw this plate down, it may bind up again. So that's pretty darn good. Yeah, when I put And there are 2 set screws. Here and here. And they are meant to take the slop out if you're using a smaller diameter anti-roll bar. So necessary modification in order to run the sway bar I want to run. And that should free it up. On to the next step. All right, a couple of things. There's a mistake in the manual. It tells you to use M3x10 button head screws to hold the Nerf bars down. That is wrong. Those are 8s. I ran out of 10s and I had an excessive amount of 8s left, so I put 2 and 2 together, and they had protruded quite a bit below the bottom of the Nerf bar, well, 2 millimeters, and I thought that seemed odd, and then just adopted a wait and see attitude. So sure enough, those were supposed to be 8s because I needed 10s for attaching the top plate to the ball stud mount. So I got in there with that drill bit I talked about, and this is the movement I have. It is not stellar, but it's not super bindy, and that just may wear in on its own throughout driving. So I'd rather the part kind of wear in a little bit on its own as opposed to me creating slop by opening up that channel too much. So I'll live with that. Plus the weight of the wheels, the shocks pushing down, that binding should probably take care of itself. So we're going to leave that like that. If I get some weird handling that my mediocre skills on the track can detect, then I'll get in there and open the channel up again. But chances are with the shocks and the weight of the wheels, that will be fine. Okay, onward to bumper and steering blocks. So moving right along here, I want to demonstrate again that I made the right choice in not opening up that channel to accommodate the 1.8 millimeter anti-sway bar, because now that the front end is all but complete, look at that. Just the added weight of the steering blocks allows the arms to move freely without binding. So even though I have a setup sheet for carpet, I'm not following it with the steering geometry parts as far as ball stud spacers on the ball studs, because the geometry is very different on the 0.4 from the 0.1 and the 0.2. So I'm not going to put my 0.1 and 0.2 front end setup as far as roll center and bump steer washers, stuff like that, until I actually put it on the track, see how it does. Caster, not kingpin inclination, but caster. The caster blocks 2.5 degrees positive in the caster block and 2.5 on the bulkhead. So that's what I was trying to spit out a while ago. So positive 5 degrees of caster. And again, that's box stock. I'll leave it like that for now until I get it on the track and see. But to be perfectly honest, the impact on the handling characteristics that caster has, I've never fully explored. And some things I just like, okay, I'll get there eventually. Right now, I'm still trying to get my head around roll centers or stuff like that. So that's going to stay like that for now. And it's time to start adding the rear end. All right, well, here it is done. From where I left off, I really didn't deviate from the manual very much, so there wasn't any real need to jump in. A couple of things going off of memory here that are worth pointing out. For one, the manual recommends that you use black grease on the threads of your turnbuckles. Do it, because these new 3.5 turnbuckles are so tight, when you adjust them on the vehicle, they can actually pop off the ball. You never want your ball cup to pop off the ball stud because it's stretching every time and will increase the likelihood that it will pop off in the slightest fender bender on the track or bump of a pipe. So, really? See, the cat's a TLR fan, so he's disputing everything I'm saying, if you can hear that in the background. He doesn't know any better. He's old, like most TLR fans. Okay, focus for a lot. Let's see. We definitely need to talk sway bars. I'm going to save that for last. There are some people out there that buy this kit and are not racers, and it may be their only associated kits that don't have a context frame of reference of what comes with other kits throughout the different generations. All right. So I didn't put my setup on the truck because there's a lot of change up front with the caster angles being adjustable, the new steering rack and pinion or rack and bell cranks being adjustable, the B4 steering blocks and caster blocks are different from what I ran. So what I did do as far as my setup was I ran my shock package. I ran sort of my shock package. I ran a blue front spring. On my SC6.1 M.2, I ran a red front spring. I did go with the same oil, which was 45 TLR. I don't know the CST, but I will tell you it's TLR if you want to look up the CST. So 45 TLR in the front, 37.5 TLR in the back, gray spring in the back, and I believe back in the day, let's see, my setup sheet is here. Gray front, blue back is what I ran before. Oh, I ran a blue buggy in the back. That's interesting. Forgot about that. So not quite my shock package. Same oil. I also added which we talked about already, the front B64 sway bar. As far as the geometry of the roll centers and the camber gain by using a long camber link or a short camber link, I left all that box stock. The hubs, the rear hubs, I also built them according to the kit with regards to spacing. You can move your hub 2 millimeters forward. You can center it in the arm, or you can move it 2 millimeters back. Typically, I ran it 2 millimeters back. The layout may be different this year. There may be more cornering, more turns. So not only does moving the hub back and forth within the arm help with mechanical grip, adding or removing, it also helps with cornering. So essentially, moving that hub forward shortens your wheelbase just a little bit. So I started neutral. I started with the hub in the center of the arm. The kit calls for the rear hub to be in the, again, you got 3 millimeters of travel up and down on the rear hub. I've raised the rear hub 3 millimeters. I've raised the front steering block 3 millimeters, all in an effort to get the ride height lower. So with that, I also raised the diff 3 millimeters. When you raise your hubs, move your diff at the same time. It's not one or the other. They go up and down together to keep the angles of the driveline consistent throughout ride height changes. The pills, I left them box stock. Roll centers front and back, box stock. I added a servo steel weight. That's not in the kit. I left the electronics where the kit calls for and put them on the steel ESC plate. I did put this on my SkyRC scale to check the weight bias, and it's actually 50-50, which is interesting. When I put the body on, somebody who is much smarter than me pointed out that when the body is on the truck correctly, if you trim the crap out of the back, you're going to get a bit of a a bit more weight bias towards the front, because the body will be heavier in the front than the back. So that was good to have pointed out for me. Electronics, I mean, whatever, but I'll tell you what they are. The Servo is a cheap ass Amazon Servo. I went with, this is what I run on my outdoor truck, and it works fine. It's plenty strong, plenty fast, plenty of torque. And on carpet, I find that I'm usually putting in a high speed servo and then turning it down. I'm turning down the speed, I'm turning down the dual rates, and it's usually a micro, or not a micro servo, but a smaller servo. It's too much trouble to take out, but it's the ProTech aluminum case 160T, or ST, T for torque, I guess. Anyway, I end up turning it down. So in an effort to get weight bias, I went with a full-size servo to add a bit more weight up front, and instead of just turning it down on the radio, I went with a slower servo. So we'll see if it sucks. Then I've got several high-end servos in my pit box. The ESC, I've only ever run the Quick Run 10BL 120, but this is the G2, and it actually has turbo timing and boost and stuff now. So that's interesting. I'll play with that a little bit. Never experimented with any of that before, even in my 8-scale vehicles where I've got the little Wi-Fi adapter that goes into there, the Bluetooth dongle that goes into the vehicle, and then the programming box is actually the app on your phone. I don't touch any of that stuff because I haven't learned it yet. Battery, R1 Works 6200, slid all the way forward. Motor is a 7-turn hobby wing. I wanted an 8-turn Reedy. This is what was in stock, so this is what I got. I will for sure be turning the EPN, the throttle down. 21 tooth on a 78. I didn't change the spring and retainers here on the slipper yet, but I will. They're on order. They're from the B74. It's a heavier duty spring. If you watched my video carpet setups versus dirt setups, I do talk about that spring. And then at the back, I have installed the SC6.1 and 2, T6.1 and 2 rear anti-roll bar in blue, which is 1.3 millimeters. So let's talk about that, because my goodness, did that ever cause some commotion on the Facebook SC group. Tells me that there's a lot of bashers on there running a race truck because they don't understand sway bars. The truck, even though page 11 in the manual, let's look at that. The truck comes with a front and rear anti-roll bar. Page 11 clearly says not included, and then shows a picture of a buggy rear anti-roll bar right there. 1.3 millimeter, not included. It is included. The hardware is included. However, if you follow these instructions for constructing the link between the anti-roll bar and the rear suspension arm, it says to make the gap in between the ball cups 2 millimeter. I tried that. I saw that Associated driver who has a video of a high bike clay SC6.4. I think it's like literally the only video on YouTube, and he is using it. He's using the B6.4 rear anti-roll bar, and it looks like he's only using a 2 millimeter gap in his linkage here, and sure enough, it's touching the drive shaft. So I took a picture of that, and I went on the Facebook group, and I was like, hey, what's up with this? This doesn't look right. And oh my goodness, the truck doesn't come with a bar. You've got the front bar on the back, and then the one intelligent comment I got was, you can use that bar, but the linkage needs to be 4 millimeters, not 2 millimeters. So that means that the set screw that's threaded that holds these two ball cups together needs to be probably longer. I could have done that, but why bother when I have truck bars? So let's look at the bars. Let's educate the bashers that are running race kits. Okay, what I have here is a set of car bars and a set of truck bars. This one on my right is a T6 SC6 front anti-roll bar. You can see that the shape is similar, the angles are similar to the B6 series front anti-roll bar, but they are in fact different. And look at the size difference. Not the same bar. If you built enough, you'll know the difference. People were saying that I had put the front bar on the back of the truck by mistake. Here we have the rear B6 bar, and here we have the rear truck bar. Very different. Shape different, different angles, different size, the whole 9 yards. All right, so if you're new to this stuff and don't know the difference between the bars, side-by-side comparison. Hard to see on camera, but the ones on my right are the truck bars. The ones on my left are the car bars. All right, I certainly did not confuse them. And the kit, although the manual says they're not included, they are included. So that should put that to rest. And because I had truck bars on hand, it was just easier to go ahead and throw a truck bar on there instead of trying to make a car bar fit by modifying the links. I don't know what's up with any of that. It doesn't matter. So that's it, guys. Hope there's something of value in this build series for you. As I said, there's not a lot out there on the SC6 short course in general. If you follow my channel and looked at my videos, you'll see I have a lot of short course videos because it is my preferred 10 scale class. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye for now.